Okay, so today we'll be talking about material selection, and it's very important. You would not really hear people telling you about material selection when you're talking about general rent drawing. They just go into the general rent drawing, begins to um, go through your beams and your columns and all of that, and just model things up. But there are basic things that we need to know when we're talking about material selections, because it's very easy to achieve. It's very important in achieving good designs, right? Because it takes using quality materials, and these materials will be responsible for the functionality of your building, right? So to say, the quality of your construction now is equivalent to the materials that are being used in construction, right? So the building materials will definitely define the overall durability. And this is why we are here to talk about the material selection. Now, there are several things we'll consider when we are talking about material selections, and these are those things that we're going to be speaking about today. In the meantime, right? So things to consider while selecting materials for your project. So when you get an architectural drawing and you understand all of that, based on the understanding that you have now, you can begin to look into these factors and come out with materials that are likely going to be the best fit for your project. Now, the first one we're talking about is cost. Now, when I'm talking about cost, though, when you are searching for construction materials, you have to first know the rate, and of course this rate differs with different materials, right? But when I talk about the cost, I'm not talking about you looking for the most affordable material. I'm not talking about that, right? So what you need to look alongside the cost is the lifespan of that material, how long that material will serve you, and how how that the material can, I beg your pardon, how that the material can serve several purposes while still maintaining its quality, yet the cost is still reasonable. So we are not just looking for something cheap but then would not be durable, would not have a quality lifespan for your project, right? So because if you go to the market and you buy a substandard material, then you know that there are two things that are likely to happen. Is either you keep on changing that material each time, like often, right? Which will even cost more than if you had bought the original material, if you had bought the one you ought to have gotten in the market. Or the second possibility could be that it might cause a whole lot of damage. So if you ought to buy a an original steel bar and you went for one that is not really the plastic type, the your steel can actually behave like a plastic at some point, and it begins to cut instead of bending. It cuts. So you know that that might cause a very serious collapse and all of that, and it's going to cost you so much. Okay, so when we're talking about the cost, is a very important factor, right, in choosing your material. And do not forget, when I talk about cost, I'm not talking about the most affordable only. I'm talking about that which would serve your purpose, that which would meet the purpose to which it is used, and also will be reasonable with its cost, right? And that's on cost. Secondly, we'll be talking about the climate, right? And when I talk about climate, um you need to consider the exposure. Do you know that even when we are designing for steel or for reinforcement or all of that, we consider cover, and even the cover, it has conditions. You see something like mild, something like severe, and all of that. It is because these exposure conditions, these climatic conditions, have effect on your building materials. So it will mean that the places where concrete cannot survive, your steel might survive. In the places where steel may not survive, your concrete might survive. So you need to know which best is fit for whatever climate. You understand? So You need to know the extent of heat, you need to know how much cold, and particularly sometimes you need to know which time in the year you have much cold and much heat for particular structures that you are putting up, right? Because there are some special structures that had to deal with the time of the year, right? And you need to pay attention to that too, right? So you need to look into the climatic condition. Is the structure going to be exposed to rain, to snow, to wind, to heat, and all of that? So you from this one determine which construction material can best respond to that climatic condition or climate at hand. So when climate is to be considered, you know that you would need to look into the characteristics of your material and apply that appropriately. I believe you understand what I'm saying. Now, the first assignment now is that you would look into and search the effects of material climate on materials, on different construction materials, and look into how that you need to apply when you apply each material in what weather, in what climatic condition. I hope you get that also. Just send it to the group. For example, you're looking into the different climatic conditions you have, the maybe during the cold time or whatever it is. You look into when there is wind, snow, and all of that, and the materials that are good to um to use in that condition, and the ones that are really bad or poor to use in such conditions. So let's look out for that and send to the group not more than two materials that I need, just two. Now the third one we'll be looking at is durability. This is very essential because uh, how much your materials last, right, is dependent on how much it can either withstand subjects like moisture, corrosion, and other conditions, right? For example, we want to have a roof gutter or you want to have a canopy and all of that. You need to consider some things to have those things because you know that it has to do with water, and when the material is affected by water, for example steel, it gets affected and all of that. So you need to begin to look into such conditions, right? So when you look into the durability of that material for that particular condition, right? So you can begin to check which material is suitable for that, right? And ensure that this material can last longer and serve to which purpose you are fixing it. Now, the building material, when you're talking about durability, you might want to go for different kind of tests on for example, we have tests on steel, different kind of tests on steel, and even on concrete and all of that. So you need to look into the durability of such materials in what you are doing. So going doing all of these things will help us to know which materials are suitable for what we want to use them for. So by for example, we want to design a retaining wall for a dam, right? Or want to construct a dam itself. There are many kind of dam. In fact, there are dams that we don't need reinforcement and all of that, those old kind of dams and all of that. So whatever it is the condition at hand. You begin to look into materials, then place them on test like models and all of that, to prove that this material can withstand this condition in practical terms, and that will now give you approval or not whether to use it, right? So we know that some materials can will begin to rust, some will begin to diminish, some will begin to bend under conditions, some will begin to creep and all of that. So you begin to look into the conditions at hand and how durable your material will be for those conditions, right? Before you can go ahead. right? So it is desirable to use materials that also would require limited maintenance. So because you do not want to use materials that you not be able to that will demand much more maintenance, that will take more cost while maintaining. So you have to look into materials that have limited maintenance, and also um that you would not be replacing now and then, right? So if you are looking into using steel, you know the kind of steel you be applying, right? Don't just want to use any kind of steel, right? So that it will not allow you replace now and then, right? So that's that on durability. So let's look into the next one, availability, right? So it is also on this, uh as much as you're looking into cost, looking into climate, looking into durability, you want to be sure that this material that you are selecting, even with all of this consideration, is available at the market to get, not the one you need to travel to. For example, you have a site in Lagos, the project is in Lagos, and the material you are seeking to use would come from Abuja. So each time you want to get it, the cost of transporting that material to Lagos itself is a lot on yourself and your client, is not reasonable enough. Why not get the material that can suit that where you are at present? So you need to look into the availability of the material, and because if you don't look into the availability, it's going to see affect that cost that you already worked against in the first instance. So because transporting it and all of that thing would take the cost back to its place. And also there are some materials that if you need to transport from one end to another, it will demand that you dismantle them. You know the way they transport cars from one place to another, they dismantle them. So when they take it to when they get to where they want to actually set it up, they not need to couple them together and all of that. So there are some materials that will take more time for installation if you are looking to get them from a very far place. So it will make you spend more time on your job, increase your cost, and it's not even wise enough. So you need to look at the availability. So if certain materials, maybe you're looking at imported, if the one available at your in your particular area can be locally made and will still maintain its durability and all of that, right? So you can consider that, right? So consider that. That will really help you. So that's how availability applies to what we are talking about here. So let's look into one that we know very well, maintenance. Maintenance is as simple as saying that, even if we consider all of these things that spoken about, we need to consider the fact that we need to maintain our structures. In fact, we know that maintenance is the culture that we lack mostly in our construction, in our building world now. So we see building in the next 1, 2, 3 years, building that should last normally about 100 years. We see that in the next 2 years it become something else because we lack basic maintenance, right? So we need to look into materials that can easily be maintained and wouldn't cost much while maintaining. So for example, those that use stanchions and all of that, a very good one, you will discover that the most they can do to that stanchions is to just coat them again, right? To keep coating and keep coating and keep coating, right? So you want to look at maintenance. So if you have proper maintenance to this element, and if this element actually would receive maintenance at lower cost, right, you will discover that your building looks good, and each time you do the maintenance it looks new. Each time you renovate it looks new. So once you try as much as possible to get a good material at the start, right, you discover that it will require less maintenance, and even for this maintenance, you discover that it makes your building new each time that you do it, right? So you need to begin to look into the life and quality of building to ensure good construction, right? So it's very important that we look into maintenance. And one principle is that once you get good materials, they are easy and not too expensive to maintain. That's just basically about maintenance. Right, let's look into aesthetics. Not all materials are beautiful, even though they are durable. That's true. Not all materials are beautiful, even though they are durable. So, and also, you should also know that the peculiarity of the building you are working with at hand, that is at hand, that you're working with, needs to be checked so that you will not be importing a particular material that will deface your building. You will not be bringing a material that will even make the aesthetics, the beauty of your building off. So you need to look into what you need, look into what you want your building to look like before you can apply any material, go for any material. So know what you want the building to look like before you can choose material, so that you will not make your material, your building look off. Right, now, for example, now the type of flooring material you can select, or you select, can determine how your room looks like. For example, even the wall tiles or wall paint, you discover that it determines how much your building looks. So you want to look into what material will fit what I want to. In fact, if you check those interior decorators, those guys that are into interior decorations, you discover that they have certain colors to fit certain senses of your room or your offices. Some of them will tell you that white makes the room be it look big, even though it's not big in reality, but it makes it look big, and all of these considerations that we look into. So please, you want to consider that in your in your material selections. Now also, materials like the roof or roofing sheet would determine how your building will look like. You won't compare you using Gerald roof and compare it to using aluminum roofing sheet and all other stuff. They are two different things, and they bring out different beauty from your building. Right, so as you watch the budget, as you watch the climate, the durability and all of that, you want to also consider the aesthetics, so that uh, you would not have something that will deface your building overall. Now the last one we'll be looking into is performance. Right, so, and this is basic, like this is one thing you don't want to joke with, because we must get materials that can sustain and transmit effectively the loads of the building. Right, so you're looking at what material you want to use for this vertical as a column. Am I using a composite materials? Am I using steel? Am I using concrete? Am I using all of that? So you want to, or timber, you want to just know what material can actually perform well under this condition to transmit this load effectively. Right, so, and these materials that you want to select also should give comfort to the building and those that actually occupy the building. So you would not, because you want to make people comfortable, you now put a steel stanchion in between a parlor. Right, so that's another thing. Right, so you need to look into what material can actually perform best in that condition, probably condition of transmitting your load effectively. And also, one thing that I want to say in summary is that in selecting your materials, you want to first identify this project is a commercial project or a residential project. In fact, with this can limit you to what your consideration could be. So when it's a commercial project, you can go as far as using stanchions and all of that. But when residential project, you are limited to some things. You can use steel also and all of that, but you are limited to some things. You can't go too far as compared to your residential purpose. Right. So you want to look into all of this together to sum into your material selections and go ahead into framing your general arrangement drawing. Right, so we'll meet in the next video where I'll be showing you how to go into the general arrangement drawing and having it properly. So thank you very much. We'll see you in the next video. Bye.